Hey everybody, I'm Erik Torenberg, co-founder, partner, Village Global, a network-driven venture firm. And this is an episode of Venture Stories, where we deep dive on topics relating to tech and business with some of the world's leading experts.
Hey Villagers, this is a special episode of the podcast that was recorded live on June 14th, 2018 at the Village Global HQ. We host an event in partnership with Xoogler, a group of Google alumni and current Googlers who have come together to help each other advance their ambitions in the startup ecosystem. The audience heard a conversation between Erik, our co-founder, and two other founders who have gone through Village Global's Network Catalyst program. You'll hear Kiran Bellubbi of Keyo and Jo Varshney of VeriSIM Life share stories about their experience in NC.
Well, thanks everyone for coming to our event, and thank you for Erik and Village Global for hosting us and hosting this nice session, really sharing their feedback, and hopefully you guys can learn more about Village Global and the Network Catalyst program. So let's kind of get started. We can start with a quick round of introductions, if that's okay with everyone. We have Erik, Kiran, and Jo, two of their portfolio companies here. I actually met Erik during his on-deck days. He's employee number one at Product Hunt, and then hosted a community similar to our Xoogler community called On Deck for YC founders. That's the one that I went to. Yeah, and just a great community builder, great people person, great mentor to a lot of people. So yeah, I'll turn it over to you, Erik, and thank you, Sheila, for your help in organizing this event.
Yeah, thank you guys so much for having us. I'm super inspired. The Xoogler community, and yeah, real recognize real. So you guys are doing something awesome. So cool. So we're excited to talk a little bit about Village and the Network Catalyst program. I'll start with sort of, bit of background on myself, on the firm, and, we're going to give more of the pitch, so to speak, and these guys will say more of the real, what happens day to day. Just kidding. So on the highest level, just quick first background on myself, as they mentioned. Entrepreneur and investor, helped start a few companies. I was founding team at a company called Product Hunt, which is a discovery platform for startups, and it sold to AngelList, which is a discovery platform for investors. I then started this community called On Deck, which is for people who are looking to start or join their next company, and that's in 6 different cities in the world. And before Village, I had angel and scout invested in about 40 companies. And then the rest of my team, I came together with Ben Casanoka, who was the chief of staff to Reid Hoffman and wrote a few books, The Alliance and Startup Review, with Reid, also an entrepreneur and investor. And then later teamed up with Anne Duane, who was formerly the COO at Chegg, among many other operator experiences. And then Ross Fabini, who is a longtime entrepreneur and investor as well. And we decided to start Village Global, which is really trying to think about how the future of venture capital will be driven by networks. And we tried to build a firm that had network at every level of its DNA. And the 2 places we saw to really, really innovate were both on our LP base and both on how we make investments and how we support and source and diligence companies. So on the LP base, a lot of venture funds and LPs are, of course, are people that invest in venture funds. Our LP base this is our first time doing the presentation. Connected capital. LP base, most venture firms have sort of bigger institutions as LPs, whether it's pension funds or hospitals or, big sort of university endowments. And it's pretty cool because when they make money for the Red Cross, or they make money for Stanford, or sort of organizations that are good to give money to. But we thought, how can we build an LP base that will really add value to our entrepreneurs? And so we spent a long time, almost a couple of years, and we tried to and succeeded in getting some of the best CEOs in the world, or some of the biggest companies, to not just lend their capital and their brand, publicly endorsing the fund, but also their time. And so they spend 1 to 2 events a year with select entrepreneurs, select network leaders, and really trying to add value to our company. So that's one way we tried to innovate in terms of network at every level of our DNA. The other way we tried to innovate is from how we invest. So instead of, right now most of traditional venture is 5 GPs, Sand Hill Road, masters of the universe. We decided, how can we leverage a network and a decentralized group of angels, of founders, operators to help us both source, diligence, and support companies. Some examples of some of our network leaders. Aston Moats is the first employee at Dropbox, VP right now at an awesome music startup. Adam Grant, author and professor at Wharton. Aaron Teague runs VR at YouTube. Many others, sort of combination of domain experts, people in key geos that we think of great deal flow, and then also people in key companies that we think will have great diaspora like Google. So with that, we have created this program called Network Catalyst, which is really trying to sort of reimagine the accelerator experience. Many people here are familiar with accelerators. And so what we do right now is we're working with about 15 to 20 companies a year. We have about 10 that we did in the last year. Kiran was our first with Keyo, and Jo was our second with VeriSIM. And we said, how can we create a totally personalized and customizable experience? So in practice, that means a few things. So one is there's no demo day. We have group peer-to-peer activities, but there's no formula or factory batch like system. Well, although those can be great. And I went through 4 of them. So I have lots of great things to say about it, but we want to do something a little bit different. We have a lot of repeat entrepreneurs, people who've been through the program and say, hey, I less need, one-to-many classroom structure. I more need key connections. I want to leverage networks. I want to help, raise money from the best investors. I want help getting customers. I want help hiring through the on-deck community, for example. So we pick about one company a month, because when we go to another firm, we don't want to say, hey, here's 300, a few hundred companies. We want to say, hey, here's one company we're really excited about. And we're sort of manually doing that fundraising process with and for them. For some companies, we've taken some of our equity and given it to advisors who are specific domain experts for that company. Jo and Jared is an example you could talk about in a bit. And we really tried to emphasize sort of connections over content, personalized over programmatic. And it's not a set. We don't think that every company needs to raise money after 3 months. Some want to raise after 9 months. Some want to really focus on getting product market fit first. Some want to raise right away. People go at their own pace, and we want to, create a program that works with that. So with that in mind, that's sort of the high level on Village Global and the Network Catalyst program. To pass it off to Kiran, and he could talk a little bit about himself and his experience with Keyo as part of the program.
Cool. Hi guys, my name's Kiran. I founded Keyo 13 months ago. Went through the Network Catalyst program. They were the first check when I started raising money. This is my second startup. The first one was in the music business, a company called Applause that got acquired in 2016 by Live Nation. That's just an intro, and happy to answer questions.
Yeah.
Do you want me to talk a little bit about my experience?
Yeah. How did Village? How did Ross help you? How did we help you?
So I'd raised money before in the Valley. I raised $15.5 million for my last company for Applause. So I'd sort of done the sandhill, jog up and down, and had an exit as well. So I was fairly confident of being able to raise money, set up a team. But then I started talking with Erik, Anne, and Ross very early on. So there were 2-3 things that stood out in this experience for me. I was thinking about maybe applying at VC. A bunch of VC partners invested as well as part of when we didn't go there, and ended up doing Village. But the thing for me, the 2 things that were important after having run a company before for 8.5 years, and then getting another chance, to do it again. The most important thing initially for me was to understand the margins that the business was potentially going to generate. So when I first interacted with Ross and Anne and Erik, we never really talked about funding, because there was no funding to do. We were trying to figure out if the business had software-like margins that were repeatable in different geographies, and really honing in on the idea and how it would sort of expand. So I was the only founder in the company. I had a core team of 3-4 people that were sort of programming with me. But initially, it was all about sort of working with the team here at a macro level, higher level, just trying to understand the strategy first of the business. So that helped a lot, like in terms of actually, before you do anything else external, to be able to understand the nitty gritty of the business and where it would go. That was super helpful. That was number one. And you might have that in your own networks and stuff. And I definitely did, but this created a structure for the conversations. It was something that we were going to discuss, and that was work that we had to do as a team. The second was just raising money, of course. So raising money for me is always it's a process. I've raised some before, and this company will probably end up raising a lot more than the last time, but it involves real work that can be quantified, and somebody's got to do it. Typically, it's the founder, and it's a thankless job, and it takes all your time and effort for a period of 3 to 6 months. So if you can figure out a process around it, just like everything else in a startup, when you have help, it's just better, When you work together, it's better. So for me, the fundraise aspect was definitely part of it. And after, I can answer questions about the specifics of how that worked.
And you raised from a bunch of different people, but the biggest check was from Obvious.
Yeah, Obvious Ventures led our seed round. We ended up raising $5.5 million in the seed round, the first capital into the company, which is fairly sizable. And then we've topped off another $1.5 million in venture debt, which we use it if we need it. Right. So that was a total fundraise of $7 in the seed.
Ed Williams is one of our LPs.
Yes.
So that's, a lot of our LPs have later stage funds that we hope to help on the fundraising side. A lot of people, when they think about whether it's Village Network Catalyst or any accelerator, they say, hey, that's a lot of equity, 127%. And I think what sometimes people don't realize is if you raise, $1 million at 4 cap or 5 cap, that you're giving up 20% of your company. And sometimes if you could do that 127% and then raise, 2 on 20, it could be, financially sound from a dilution perspective. You actually might save a lot of dilution.
Oh, absolutely. And we had that happen to us where we started raising in sort of not opportunistically, but in a very focused manner, but pitching to certain types of funds. And when the yeses started to come in, the valuation started to grow, and that entire process definitely took 2-3 months.
And what's another example of the Village Network? Man, I feel like I'm selling myself, but it's all informational. Yeah. The Village Network helping, whether it's not to lead you, of course, but whether it's meeting with Reed or whether it's, trying to get an intro to a key company. What's an example of how the Village Network?
So see, 2-3 things, when you're raising a round, and so the 2 steps that are critical are step 1, which is it a venture? Can it be a venture backed company, right? Can it be that big? That's step 1. And if step 1 is a yes, and if those, the business can sort of be repeatable at high margins, software margins, and scale, then the next step is sort of how do you raise? So with Village, the thing that helped me a lot was I never had to go in there and just start selling myself day one, right, with a VC. And the step up to the pitch is as important as the pitch itself. So when you're going in for a raise and you're pitching to a partnership, when the introductions come from the Village network, right, it creates a sense of urgency. And that's the one thing that closes deals, is a sense of urgency. If you don't have that in your fundraise, you're not going to close a big fundraise, right? Right now, like $500,000 to $1 million is fine, but more than that, if you don't have real momentum, you're not going to do that. You're not going to be able to do that. And one person cannot create momentum, right? Because it's the valley, you need a lot of people to talk and a lot of people to say the right things at the right time. And that you cannot be the only one saying the things about yourself. Whereas that comes across as really odd. You can't go into a fundraise saying we are great constantly. Like that doesn't work. So you need a team prepping you and getting you up there so that the right people are interested in listening to what you have to say. So I thought that was super helpful for us. And then, just having the Village brand opened a lot of doors for us in the landlord community in Brooklyn, in Manhattan, as well as in the Bay Area now. I mean, those faces, people do know them. They don't know who Sequoia is.
Right. The LPs.
The LPs. But when people look at, if you send people an email, say a sales conversation is not going anywhere, and you want to sort of, drift the conversation in areas that might interest people, when you send them the Village Global link, it helps. Yeah. It helps.
And yeah, we really think a lot about, optimizing the fundraising process and I think I really appreciate what you said, that it's a process. Most people don't treat it like a process. They're like, who do I know who has money? Let me just go to them and see what's up. But we really, help them think about it like a funnel. We help them curate, who are the right investors they should speak with relative to their stage in their company, who are the best introductions to get to those investors. We make those introductions, and then the back channeling, the setting up the pitch, and then the back channeling.
After the pitch, the back channel. So typically, just the last company I did raise money, $15.5 million. So I know what happens back channeling after, right? Say, no, there wasn't Village, which I did in my last company. You exit the meeting, everyone tells you how wonderful you are, and then that's it. And then they never respond. And then you like, what's happening here? Right? Because a no, you're never going to hear a no from a VC. That just doesn't happen. Right? It happens once every 100 times, and you remember the person who said no. Right? You act, because everybody else they just ignore you. Right?
That's why they don't.
Yeah, that's part of being a VC. You cannot say no. You can say no in 100 different ways, but not the word no. We cannot do this deal. So the back channeling is critical, because when you pitch and that week you have 6 meetings lined up or 4, before you go out and waste your bullets on all the others that are going to come later, you have to really hone in on what the message is for the fundraise. What is it that you're selling really in the venture capital world? So that back channeling was super critical for us in 2 ways. One, of course, you get a year into whether they're going to invest or not and what they like or what their concerns are, and that's super helpful. But most importantly, it's the initial 10, 15 pitches, right? If you can get a back channel conversation going through some of the Village partners, they're actually telling you where your weak points are in the pitch so you can improve. Otherwise, you go through 30, 40, 50 pitches without ever learning much. It's not working and you get frustrated, but other than that, there's no specific learning.
Right. Before we pass it to Joe, one thing that was fantastic, Kiran, I want to add is that we've also just recently given every Network Catalyst founder the ability to refer another company into Network Catalyst. And it's really community focused. We really peer-to-peer. You can see we all really are dedicated for the long term. And one thing I should mention there is 75% of our capital is for follow-on investing. So it's not, hey, 3 months or 6 months, 9 months, and then have a nice life. We're really committed for the long term and want to be, one of the biggest players at the table. So Kiran, that's fantastic. Thank you. Joe, would you like to introduce yourself, VeriSIM, how you were thinking about, fundraising before Village, how we got in, your journey through Village and what that was like?
Well, sure. Thanks, Kiran. This is very exciting, and I'm very happy to be here and discuss my experiences with Village. One of the best parts about Village Global is the diversification. I'm sitting here and I feel like I just learned about Keyo in a very new light, even though we know about each other's companies, and the journeys are so different because I come from a very biotech healthcare perspective, where everything is slow. Like, you can't even imagine how slow things can be, but there is really no, once you're in, you're in. If that's the kind of business healthcare or, pharma companies really they take forever, as if you're asking $20 million. They do their diligence for months, and then they're realizing, okay, yes, and that yes is we're going to be with you for 10 years. And that is a bit different than, most of the software margins for other tech companies that perhaps most of you, which is what I'm assuming, that come from a very technical background and less of the pharma or healthcare background. So a little bit about me first. I'm a veterinarian. I was a small animal practitioner before I got really bored. I thought I was very fascinated by diseases. I don't know how many people here feel that way, but viruses was one of the very interesting particles, and I can go hours and hours about what viruses are and can do and how they mutate, and evolution is real if you just know about viruses. But I felt like my technical skills, so I learned coding because I come from that age group where computers were new, and C programming was one of the most new language then that I learned when I was 8 years old. Didn't realize that medical training has nothing to do with how technical you can be, because it's all react and not think. And for that, I pursued my PhD more in the translational medicine, or in medical aspect, they say comparative oncology, with computer science genetics, to really think about this company VeriSIM. because most of the diseases or drugs you have or you take that come through pharma, you have to do animal testing. You cannot get a drug in the market without animal testing, and unfortunately, rats are not humans and humans are not rats. We all know that, but we still do all these testing, and they are 92% inaccurate, which costs the drugs market to be like $2.6 billion for the price tag. And that's how pharmas are such big players forever. And what is the biggest bottleneck is they all know that. They are wasting their money and time and on a wrong drug or wrong candidate, but there's really no alternatives for animal testing because technically speaking, healthcare biotech is still pretty backwards. Version 1.0 compared to what Google or even Facebook can do with analytics and whatnot. To really change that, what VeriSIM is really trying to do is creating computer-aided software, whole body simulations for animals and humans, which runs with an ML engine, so that you don't really need to test your drugs on animals, which helps you remove the wrong drugs or very toxic drugs early on in the drug development stage, and create very personalized human clinical trials. So you don't need 100 people for one of the trials for drug testing of proper dosage, because computationally we are at a time scale where we should be able to tell quickly whether this drug is first going to respond on a real human or animal body, and number two, is the dosage right. So with our long-term mission is that all of us in the room and in the world are able to use a software simulation platform and take it to the doctor and say like, hey, based on my age, ethnicity, disease profile, and I'm running my own simulation, seems like I need to reduce, let's say, Tylenol's dosage. And the doctor is able to look at it and integrate it with your other health records and is able to tell you more personalized way how much Tylenol you should take. So this is a hard pitch. I mean, I don't know how many people could get it. It's a lot of tech. It's a lot of different disciplines integration. It is hard to sell. And I come from a very pure scientific background. And I was not really... So I gave a lot of talks at Stanford, UC, and I worked at Genentech. So all that was helpful, but it was still very heavy tech and having to really communicate that to investors who, have 30 seconds attention span on really getting to know who you are and what your company is difficult. So I still remember that email where one really good friend of mine, Ben, introduced me to Erik, and he said, hey, you would really like Erik. He's a great mentor, people person, and get in touch with him. And I had no idea who Erik was. And I was like, who? And so I looked him up. He's like, well, he doesn't have a PhD. I don't know what I'm going to pitch him, what he's going to know, because he doesn't come from my background. But I emailed him and I said like, hey, you want to meet with me, or I can tell you what we're doing. And he was traveling for Village Global actually, and I got a response back, and he said, hey, I don't do biotechs. And that was like, well, my company is not really like traditional biotech. We're not going after developing that one drug. So I said, hey, I know this may sound weird, but why don't we just meet? Because you may be intrigued by what the idea is, because it's not just a healthcare company. So he brought someone pretty solid, and someone...
Laura Deming, with Longevity Fund.
Yeah, Laura Deming, and she interviewed me pretty hard. And I was like, holy crap, I got very excited. I like people who are intense and ask me questions about my field. And it was pretty exciting to know that there are people who understand what I'm talking about. And that's how my relationship with Village Global started. So Erik, I guess they did back channel, and then he came back and then said, describe what Village Global is, and he said, I'm willing, I would work my ass off to get you your next round of funding, and he did. I don't know what it was, because I was also considering another academic program. They did not care what I was pitching, because they just believed their own principles, and it kind of rubbed me off the wrong way. But with Erik, he said, I do not have that experience, but I will work my ass off to give you, what you need. And that personalization is something, what I really needed. I did not want to go through the whole school structure, because I've been in school for a really long time. But I really wanted backers for VeriSIM, and I needed the voice for VeriSIM to be, heard not just by me, but other investors in the town or outside. And Village has really kept that promise since day zero, actually. And not only Erik, then I got introduced to Anne, Ross, Ben, and all of them have been like extremely helpful, and they still are. Like, I can just text Erik or call Anne, or like, if, as founders, it's a very lonely, as thankless and very lonely sometimes, because you have to make lots of decisions for the company and for the team members, and 5 years what the company is going to look like. And sometimes it's like, oh man, I do not know what can I do when I'm dealing also with the technical aspects of the company. And I feel like I can just call Village, and they're there, and they don't judge. They tell you exactly what they think, even if you don't want to hear that, which is sometimes, it's a hard truth that you have to hear. And I had to let go someone pretty important in the company, and a Village helped me do that. And I think that was very important because that whole process was very quick. And after that, it was great that we got rid of him, but things are much better when someone is backing you up in a more personalized way, and it's just not a school structure and you just graduated sort of thing. So the whole journey is still continuing, and very, very pleased and happy that they still have kept their word.
Awesome. Thank you for that. A couple follow-ups. One is, we now do biotech for anyone listening, not just, enterprise around biotech and healthcare. Partially inspired by our success with you guys and VeriSIM. Can you say more, Jo, about what the fundraising process was like for you and how Village played a part in that?
Honestly, I was like this naive person. I just asked them, like, hey, I need help with fundraising, and everyone told me, and you read that, it takes 3 to 6 months to raise even $1 million. And I don't know, Village's magic got me in less than 2 months. This $1.5 million, that's kind of not right. But which was great because I just wanted 500K. And that whole feeling of understanding the momentum, like how Keyo or Kiran was mentioning, it changed the way Village helped me with the back channel. And also they have a brain trust program where they found me an advisor. His name is Jared C. Hafer, and he, at 11 p.m., I still remember, we are pitch practicing because he's trying to make me more high level and not go too technical so that, everyone can follow through in the room, and really help, because once you know where your weak points are and, you're willing to take the feedback from, seasoned entrepreneurs or investors, it was very easy and smooth process, and they helped me how to close fundraising. Like, I don't know how many of you are first-time entrepreneurs, but these are they look simple prompts, but they become the biggest pain in your ass because, you are focused on that and not focused on building your company. So if someone is telling you things who have the experience, right kind of network, and you believe and, kind of follow through what they're saying, really, I felt like the whole process was very smooth for me. And now we have so much more interest from the first round that already the first investors that, were interested, now they're super interested and they want to lead our next round. And it's fantastic that relationship was, built because of Village Global.
Awesome. Thank you so much, both of you guys, for joining. So with that, would like to open it up for questions, for Q&A.
And I think if you have questions, just kind of give your name and what you're working on, so you can get a sense of that.
I have a question for you, Kiran. I think for both of you.
Yeah.
So my name is Adi, and I'm working on a project that is trying to build a peer-to-peer open database network for blockchain applications.
Can you say that one more time?
A peer-to-peer open database network for blockchain applications. So my question to you was, so you both spoke about momentum and how it changes valuations during a round. So does that mean that the different investors in the same round get different deals? If so, what would be the value? What would be the difference between the lowest and highest valuations?
It depends. I mean, so the way to raise at a higher valuation is to have a term sheet at a lower valuation. So when you have your first, so the way I always think about fundraising is that for me, and this is just me, there's always a plan C, which is, the bare minimum that we need to do what we've planned to do for the next 18 months to 24 months. And then there's a plan B and a plan A, and each of those has to work. Like, we have to have term sheets in every one of those plans. So in terms of momentum, I very rarely say yes to the first deal, really. You build up to a better valuation. You build up with a few wins to more confidence, and you build up to the valuation that you really want. So the way you would sort of think about this conceptually is, you might open up a $1 million note, for example, which could be capped or uncapped at a certain valuation. And when you see it fill up really quick, maybe you bring the note holders, a few of them that are less valuation, or that are valuation agnostic, you bring them up to a term sheet and then work your way up from there. So it just depends on how you want to sort of proceed. And, if you've got a note open already, if you've raised some capital already, how you've used it matters. So for really engineering driven teams from Google and stuff, you can do a lot with 3 or 4 engineers, right? So if you really work back from there, a plan C for a ex-Google team really with a founder and 2-3 engineers, you're looking at, let's say 200,000 is needed for 6 months. That's 100,000 per person salary, right? But for 4 people, instead of 400, you're trying to raise 200 for 6 months. And you can build a lot in 6 months with 4 engineers, right? So the way to think about it then is 200K starts, the gravity is building now, right? You're building momentum for you and your team going into a bigger fundraise. So if you're starting from 0, for example, a specific example here in this case would be you have to get to 200. Otherwise, you can't build what you need to build at the velocity that you need to build it. So, thinking about it that way. So you have a win with 200. 200 should be a slam dunk, right? So once you have that secured, then you have more confidence to go into a $500,000 fundraise. So you can bring people in, the people that you really like working with initially, open up a note for them, things like that, but carry the momentum forward is sort of how to think about it.
And another, I'm not sure, to a question you didn't necessarily ask, but sometimes people ask us is, hey, I've already raised $250K or $500K from angels. Is Network Catalyst still appropriate? And I've raised it at a 5 cap or whatever it is. And we say a couple things. One is, if you haven't taken the money yet, reconsider if they're the best, the best partners you want to have at the table, because with Village, we hope we can really optimize on getting you the best partners that you could potentially get. 2 is, yes, it's very common in other accelerators to sort of set the standard. YC, for example, people raise $1 million or $2 million from Excel or other great firms, and then realize, hey, I'd also benefit from the YC network. And those investors are typically pretty supportive if they believe in the value. And for us too, some companies, I believe we were the first investor in these companies, but some companies have raised $500K or $1 million and then decided to go through the Network Catalyst. And we make sure that we're collaborative with the other investors, and we're all trying to make the pie bigger.
Hi, I'm Laura. I'm building the Brightly company. We are a marketplace for ethical and sustainable goods. So we're trying to connect people to products that are changing the world. Question around what you look for specifically in companies that contact you. I know that a variety of accelerator programs have different signals that they pick up on. So I was curious really what Village looks for.
Yeah, it's an interesting question. Right now we've only done 10 companies in our Network Catalyst. 4 are in health and bio, and a year ago we said we didn't do any health and bio. So I think there's a few things. One is, we have this on deck community, which is sort of a cool way to see entrepreneurs work over time. I was tracking Joe for a bit, through Ben, through a few others. Ben came in, so we met through the on deck community. Ross had known Kiran for a long time. Very interested, especially early stage, with how founders test their ideas, how they think about bringing on co-founders. So that's all to say that it's not a super quick process. We're looking for X, Y, Z checklist and then you're good. We like to see founders really over time and see how they brainstorm their idea, how they test product market fit, how they bring on new team members. And you really get a sense for how people operate, because day one, sometimes people are all talk, or sometimes the opposite. They don't sell themselves super well, but they're amazing executors. The other thing we look for is founder market fit. Are you, we sort of joke internally, if Ryan Chesky was running a food delivery startup, it's not automatically self-evident that it would be, as big as Airbnb. Or if Travis from Uber was running Medium, or if Ed Williams was running Uber, like it might not be the best fits. So really, like, Jo, for example, is a veterinarian and then also has, computer science and genomics background, sort of making her uniquely situated to build that company. We look for founder market fit. And the other thing we look for is, and sector agnostic, like again, we have 4 healthcare companies, we have a couple of real estate companies now, we have an esports company, we have a company that's doing Twitch for makeup. We look for a couple things. One is, can this, we're a $100 million fund, we're looking for outliers. Can this business be enormous? And 2 is, do they have some insight or some secret or something that they've figured out, whether it's a go-to-market or product innovation or something in the strategy that is defensible and differentiates them from other people who are trying to do the same thing. So that's sort of a high level of what we're looking for. But
to add to that, I think my initial experience was, I knew Ross for a long time because we'd worked together with my last company. He was with Kapoor Capital, Mitch Kapoor and Frida's fund. So I'd gotten a chance to work with Ross. But by the time we'd sort of entered the ticketing portion of that startup's life, we already there was no escaping that business, There were already a bunch of us working on the product, and we had moved away from this band of the day product, which had like a lot of millions and millions of users, and pivoted into ticketing. And when we pivoted into ticketing, we saw initial traction, but the margins were so thin, right? And then the thin margins, they subsisted. They don't change themselves. So 4 years later, you're working on this thing, which could have been a decent business. But since the margins were so thin, it just felt like you were in the rat race. You were the rat in the mill. You were just going and going and going, and the margins were so thin, So this time, when I first started interacting with Ross, I had a core kind of loosey-goosey idea and some stuff that was working in an app, and it was around open houses. That's it, right? And we knew we could do it for sales. We could use the same platform. We could go that way, or we could do rentals. We explored commercial, and the exploration was hours and hours of just conversations and then talks with, and this is Village had not funded us yet because we clearly didn't know what we were doing, back then. And then, so with that initial process, that was very real with Ross. And then after that, they invested. And I remember I was here in this room, multiple pitch practice sessions where, I'm kidding you not, but every week I had a completely new pitch for the company. Like it was completely different because the same core idea could be applied in different ways, So if you're in that place, it helps because you don't want to go and burn these chances out on the streets here, So you want to wait until you have something that clearly captures, a moment in time, then you raise. So for that, this kind of format is helpful. I'm sure YC does the same thing, and it's all about this basic core ethos. But here, because we were just 5 of us around this table, and Erik, and then we'd do all sorts of pitch practice sessions, recorded conversations. We had some video stuff happening. We've had various question and answer things where the other founders would poke holes at you.
It was all the founders telling the other founders how their pitch wasn't very good.
I got that a lot.
Yeah. But all 5 of them ended up raising, $1.5 to $7 million. So, it was all great. Thanks for the question.
Yeah, hi, I'm Vijay. I actually work with Murli on a company called Hashcut. So we're building AI to automate gaming highlights. And so I guess my question to you, Erik, is is Village only an accelerator, or do you guys also invest, at the pre-seed seed stage outside of the accelerator?
Yeah, so we sort of have a couple things. One is we sort of think about it in the sense of stage. So we do have a focus on our network catalyst companies in terms of where our GP attention goes, in terms of priority LP access. But we do, we have this decentralized group of investors, and sometimes they will invest outside the program. But that is typically driven for sort of like last check-in. If Sequoia's, leading, big seed or A or Andreessen or something, and we see an opportunity, we do some of that outside of. But in terms of where GP focus tends to be, and firm focus tends to be on the Network Catalyst program.
And it's what are the details of the program? You invest $120,000. It's
$120K for 7%.
7%, and it's over the course of 3 months, 6 months.
Yeah, there's sort of we say 90 days, but really there's no stop because we're 75% of our fund is for follow on, and we're trying to make every company successful. And right now, every company has been successful. And because we're a startup ourselves, we're going to go to our LPs and say, hey, this program that's only had a few companies, we want to say 100% of them have raised their next round or have been, here's where they are. So because we're a startup, just like you're a startup, we're really trying to prove that it works.
Thanks.
For sure.
Keith, working on a early stage project doing drone infrastructure to support commercial drone operations. And question is mainly for Keyo. You had mentioned that you would strategically start your term sheet with a lower valuation. Could you tell us more about the discovery process that you go through to kind of ultimately lock down on the term sheet?
So there are 2-3 aspects to this, right? One is sort of the amount you need, right? How much money are you trying to really raise? So typically in the Valley, just given my experience, I've seen seed rounds, regardless of how much money you're trying to raise, there's a 22 to 25% dilution at the seed round. That's going to happen. Then there's the A is, between 25 and 30% dilution at the A. So just given that math, these are generalizations, but across the board, they ring true. So if that's the case, then if regardless of how much money you're raising and the dilution is the same, then, you need to pitch as many people as you can to get one yes. That's what people do typically. So it just depends on how big your team is and what you really want to spend the money on. In the seed round, typically, if you start spending money on customer acquisition, that would be huge red flags, right? So in your pitch, customer acquisition dollars spent, if you raise 2 million and you spend $1 million on customer acquisition, that's a huge red flag for me personally, at least. I don't tend to pitch that. Then the question becomes, what do you need the money for? And if it's for engineering, then that's very good, right? That means you can attract good talent. You can get engineers to come and join your company. It's a great thing, right? It just depends on how many people you are going to pitch to get there and how you're going to get there. Notes are one way to get there. Preferred equity financing is another way to get there. I don't know if it answers your question, but I'm trying. There isn't a fixed formula, unfortunately. It's as much like an art as it is like a science.
In that process, do you or Joe or Erik, do you think about do you come up with something you think makes sense for you, take it to a few folks, and they're like, no, that's ludicrous, and then you kind of go back and readjust, or how do you kind of get to that term sheet that's kind of... Typically,
early signal 4-person teams with strong engineering talent, you can possibly, you're in the realm of 3 to 4 mil cap kind of, a raise. So you can do a $500,000 to $1 million raise on those terms. But if you have something that works, something that's actually out there that people are using, then there's a multiple on that, potentially. The caveat emptor being that you actually have a technical team that's delivering some value in a cadence that makes sense, right? That makes it competitive. It could take you 10 years to build something, but that VCs are not interested in 10-year build outs, right? So how fast you build stuff, what the cadence is, all of that is the momentum that you need. So just thinking about it in terms of how much money do you actually need, right, is an interesting exercise.
Right. I resonate with Kiran. We did it a bit differently. We did safes, and I put the valuation because I was going for a lower amount than what we raised, and it became fascinating that my terms were pretty much founder friendly for what I wanted to raise, and one that really actually I should have mentioned. Village really helped with that because I was thinking for a more expensive term sheet from one of the investors, and then the safes was something they all came around, and it was a fantastic institutional round and bunch of angels, which is where I really recommend always thinking about why do you need money and what you're really trying to build with that money, and trying to put what would be your trade-off, what would you want from those investors that you're talking to. If they're not really going to help you with the, let's say, 1 year, 6 months goal, I would recommend going after, taking slightly more time and going after the ones that would help, because especially the seed, or now they call pre-seed, which is what I call it then, at that level, you want to know, are these people going to back me up, because you will need that kind of support for the next rounds. And then it's even easier, because once you see that backing up, those investors help you get to your aim and build that relationship. And I think Village, being our front runner, has been very helpful and been very founder friendly around.
So Lei, with Xoogler, I think a lot of us here, right, we all have, just by the virtue of being here in the Valley and having gone through Genentech, founding your previous startup, and Erik, obviously with all your experiences, and here with Google, a lot of us has our own personal network. So how do you see the Village network being different from your personal network? And how has that been helpful?
I'll start. You guys can do it. I think it's a few things. And, a lot of VCs will say that, hey, we're all about networks too. And to some extent they are. VCs have big networks. They network all day. That's what they do. But they sort of only leverage their own networks, or the networks of the 5 partners. We've really tried to create an institution that leverages the networks of other people's networks, if that makes sense. So for example, our LPs represent, the biggest acquirers, customers, companies in the world. And so you might, if you're trying to get to someone at Google, perhaps you've got it all figured out, but we can help with someone at Facebook and someone at Microsoft and someone at Amazon, someone at Bloomberg and someone at all these different companies, get sort of the right person at the right time. And the other thing, I should have said this in the initial, is we sort of do things on a customized basis that another accelerator at scale couldn't really do. So one of our companies is selling to heads of growth. And so we're putting together an event, inviting, 100 heads of growth that could potentially be their customers. We have done, because we got Joe, a few biotech events, and one of them led to someone who's now an advisor, someone very happy. Genentech was now an advisor to your company. So we really leverage our network to find the right sort of domain experts for individual companies, but also potential customers. Obviously, we know all the investors, so we run, we have sort of sophisticated software that is tagging investors, filtering by stage, by domain. And then we have our on-deck network for engineers and people who are looking to start their next thing or join their next thing, which people can hire or find their co-founder through. So, I would say we help with networks both on hiring customers, investors, and then advisors or other key introductions at big companies. I don't know if you guys have anything to add to that, but that was a high level.
I agree with Erik. I think for my company, I have to go beyond what is being done in healthcare or Genentech. So I needed engineers, I need ML scientists, and believe it or not, very few people really go through the painstaking health or life sciences or biology learnings to become, and then go for an ML engineering aspect. So it becomes very crucial to find the right type of people, and having a network of people that I can just ask Erik to introduce to, or, go to different events that maybe, we may find those people, has been very helpful.
And we all leverage each other's network. It's all bigger than any one person's. Right. Than my network or Ben's network or Reed's network or whoever's network. We're all leveraging each other's networks to find the right people.
Yeah. For me, if I could add one thing, the fundraise process, regardless of who you knew and what you did in the past, every fundraise process is new, right? It's like a rebirth as an entrepreneur. The whole journey is brand new, And what helped me personally is, Erik's got a huge network that, he's spent a lot of years cultivating. You get to piggyback off of that for, certain meetings, certain aspects where people are willing to take a 45-minute to an hour-long intense discussion on your product, on your company, because they know Erik and they trust him, right? So, obviously, when you start a company, your own networks, you've got to hit them up a lot, right? That obviously is happening. So if you're cultivating and farming your own network, obviously for your own company, who else is going to do that? Erik can't do that for you. So you have to do it for yourself. But now suddenly there's Erik and Ben, Ross, who are helping and opening up their networks to you at a particular moment in time. See, time is very important here, because you can't expect people to help you for 6 months to 9 months doing a fundraise, right? That gets tedious and time consuming. So time is important. So the more people that are on your side with really meaningful networks in a short period of time, that's where the network effect compounds itself. If you continue to do this for years on end, then regardless of how many people you have behind you, the effects are not as, profound. Does that make sense? So the network catalyst really, it is exactly what it says it is. A network catalyst program. And that's the way to think about it. Time is a crucial element here, right? Because if you don't have the money before you run out of steam, then you don't have a company. If you don't raise enough capital, you can't go on indefinitely. At least I couldn't, just working in my garage and sort of not, having a real company. You can't hire the right talent because you don't have capital and no one's interested in, wild goose chases anymore. So time and then the startup factors, they all matter. So the network component was super interesting to me. Anne's network was super profound because she came from a very operationally heavy background. So when she made an introduction to other people that were in operations, it meant something. When Ross made an introduction to people in the venture capital world, where he spent a lot of time, and then before that with Success Factors and that acquired his last company, that made a lot of sense. So a lot of times, even though people didn't invest, we learned something from that interaction. And I think that was the important bit, for me.
Totally. And the one thing I'd add is also founder and peer-to-peer support. And that every company that's joined our Network Catalyst company has talked to Kiran and Jo about what the experience was like. And, we've all been founders, and it's really that, founder community of, you can call it any time for references, back channel, support, advice, and all going through, similar process at the same time, or similar stage. Great question. Any other questions?
Hi, I'm Ankit, with the Xoogler, one of the Xoogler organizers as well. So, I'm just more curious about what exactly is, part of your 90-day program, and are there any specific goals which you as Village Global tend to achieve within that 90 days? Yeah,
so it's we say 90 days is sort of a framework, but some companies raise 9 months after, some companies raise 6 months after. We really it's 100% personalized and customizable. So we really sit down with each and every company and say, hey, for us to raise a really strong seed round, what do we need to achieve? And for some, they're heads down focused on product market fit. For some, they're trying to or tweaking the product. Others are sell. And so, we do have group office hours similar to some others where we sit in this room and have dinner and, practice our pitch or talk about things we're working with. We have individual office hours with our GPs and some of these other network leaders, key advisors. And then we can do individualized one-off event. We had a esports company, so we almost did a mini demo day for them where we brought, 45 of the biggest esports investors, one dinner here, what this company, the Meta, is working on. They raised a couple $100,000 just that night. And that was day zero. Others trying to get customers, so we throw a customer event for them. But really, advisors, we throw an advisor event. Really whatever the company needs beyond sort of the scaffolding of group office hours, individual office hours, we're on call to give.
I just want to add, so basically it's let's say you're starting a company, Erik or Anne would ask you, what is your 90-day program? What do you want for your next 90 days? And how can we help you get there? Which is what they did for me. And that's very crucial because my 90-day program is very different than Keyo's 90-day program. I'm assuming you raised different round too. So it's very important to hear that this is my 90 days, what I want.
See, I went into it with two specific things. One was I really wanted to understand and hash out the strategy for the company, right? High level, is it a healthy software business? Before we get into the work and it becomes, a lot of work, are we working for the right things? Is it going to create enough value where it can sustain a software team, That was one thing. And so I had definite expectations around that. So a lot of conversations around, a lot of time was spent on that. And then the second thing was just the process of the fundraise. So if you think about the process of the fundraise, the kinds of things that you might want to do, right? You have to get the assets of the pitch ready, the actual physical assets of the deck and how it looks and whether it makes sense and the flow that that it creates, the conversation that the deck creates, right? So that requires tremendous amount of cycles. Typically you're working on it alone or with a co-founder. Here you've got, a network of people that have done it before, as well as are able to guide you for your specific business on making it more impactful, right? Whatever 45 minutes pitch that you're presenting. And then after that, so in that process is this physical, as mundane as it sounds, getting conversations set up in tandem. So you're trying to set up you're running a process to raise a round, which means you're actually going to go and meet with 25, 30 people. So setting up meetings with 25, 30 people in Silicon Valley in a short period of time is also hard because everyone's doing hundreds of other things, So all of these elements, and then post-pitch, the feedback, and then improvement again, and then this loop that you need to get into to improve, and then finally raise a round is all kind of in that 90-day period. So even from choosing the right people. So a lot of times, I had a network, I would add people in there because I'd had a good time meeting with somebody before. That is like it's almost like the amoeboid way of raising money. I had a good time with the person at one point. That's silly, right? Or the person listened to me. Here it's about, that specific partner has already invested this year. So in a firm that has 4 or 5 partners, they're looking to do one deal a year. If the person has already invested, you probably would not know about it. Or if you do, and they're still, participating in the entire pitch, the chances are very low that partner is going to sign you another check that year. So these kinds of things at scale, at 30, 40, meetings, some people are going to drop off. Other people are going to lack interest in the middle. Some people would have invested in a competitor. Others are distracted. All of it is work. Somebody's going to do that work. If you work with this team and assign specific tasks, so we actually had a spreadsheet of all the biggest names in the valley in there, and everyone was shared in that spreadsheet, and the specific tasks of reaching out, warm leads, intros, the entire process was run from there. And I didn't do that myself. I did that with Erik. Anne took 5 or 6 people. Ross took 10, 15 people, and then we just went through the entire list and constantly did that for 3 months.
And the other thing I'll add is that recently we've started to build out a little bit of a platform team. We just brought on Colin, who's leading our content and helping our entrepreneurs tell their story. And he was previously working with Gary Vaynerchuk, so he knows how to get things spread and tell great stories. And Sheila's been working with us for a while now, and we're going to do 70 events this year? 170 plus the 30 we've already done, 70 in the next 6 months. So there's a lot of things to go, both, helping people hire, helping with customers, helping with advisors, helping with meeting our luminaries. There's a lot of activity at Village to plug into, but also, it's customized where you say, hey, I just need to get this product right. So you're going to focus on that until it's time to leverage the network.
Maybe we have time for one more question.
Chris from Xoogler as well. So it's multi-pronged. It's about the startups that you have in your program and the ones you want to bring in. Can you talk about who they are? Because that's two lovely companies. But also, do you take companies outside of the valley, you bring them in for 90 days, and then perhaps you can go back to wherever they are? And the last one is how do you deal with conflicts? Right, they're very early.
Yeah, it's a great question. It's great. 3 questions. I appreciate it. It's a good strategy to call 3 questions a multi-pronged question. like that one. So a few things. One is, I'm glad you did it because we didn't mention it. So Village Global. We're looking to invest all over the world, hopefully invest in a bunch of Xoogler companies. So it's a virtual program, and we've just set up our first, I think we now have 3 or 4 of the 10 companies outside of San Francisco, 1 Canadian company, and we're looking to do outside of SF and also outside the US. So in terms of, so it's virtual. You don't have to move here. It's great to come here for fundraising, but we think you should build your business wherever it makes most sense. Sometimes you should move here. Sometimes you should move somewhere else, New York, LA, wherever your business needs to be, will helpful. And we travel a lot, and we have resources in different places. The other question was other examples of different companies. One is this company called RDMD, which is also a biotech company. It's actually a pretty inspiring story. The CEO's name is Ono. It's Ono and Nancy, the co-founders. And Ono built this company called Tap Talk, which was a social video almost think of like group Snapchat before Snapchat became that. It was at the top of the App Store. It was pretty big in 2014. They actually worked out of the product and office, so we've been friends for a long time. And it sort of went big, and then as these consumer things go, it sort of didn't go big anymore, retain. And then, crazily enough, he developed a form of cancer, a rare disease, and he realized there's not much, products and services for people with rare diseases. And so he then did a lot of research on himself, and then created a hackathon for people to build products and services for people with rare diseases. That's where he met Nancy, and they're building basically Flatiron for rare diseases, a company that helps aggregate data for people that have rare diseases and then helps build products, services, and communities. And because he has real empathy with you, he is the user. He sort of has unique insight and, talk about founder market fit. And that company, in a very competitive round, just raised, I believe, $3 million from Lux, which is an awesome firm. We're super excited. I think at like a 13 valuation. That's one company. Another company is Brightside. Brightside is a company that is building products and services for people who struggle with depression and mental health, and is trying to, there's a lot of people who are struggling but don't want to go or have the resources to, or don't feel comfortable going to seek help. So it brings help to them, both in terms of consultation, in terms of antidepressants, in terms of whatever they need. And I invested in a company called Nurx previously, which is sort of birth control on demand, and it's doing really well. And this company Hims, that is also an on-demand product. That sort of space is heating up, and Brightside just raised a great round from Dave Morin at Slow, who's obviously really passionate about and a big thought leader in the space. We have an esports company called The Meta. We have a CPG company called Sathi. We have a company called GlamCam, that's Twitch for makeup. We have a travel company, it's Trip Scout. Another, a B2B marketplace for property managers called Paragon that we just invested in. Yeah, we're thinking about a couple others as well, but those are just some highlights.
And conflicts.
Oh, conflicts. I ignored the question. It's interesting. I think so right now we're small enough that, if we've seen a company that's directly competing, we've just said, hey, we're not gonna invest. I think what is hard is that sometimes people pivot, and we're not going to invest in a competitive company, or at least, we're not right now, because we all work together. We want to be super family friendly. At the same time, sometimes companies pivot. And so it's just something, people have to realize it. And we haven't had that yet, but if that happens, everyone's just got to trust that there's a, church, what's it called? Different church and state, and that, they won't be sharing confidential information with each other.